All right, welcome everyone to Unchained Capital's continuing education webinar. You can catch these the first Friday of every single month. And the goal of these is to help you on your Bitcoin journey through education. Education is empowerment, and that's something that we really, truly take to heart at Unchained Capital. And these are client exclusives, so please take advantage of them. The recordings do come out the next week on our YouTube channel, so you can feel free to send them to friends and family at that time. If you miss any part of this live webinar, you can actually stay right here and a replay will get started. So with that being said, my name is Justine Harper. I'm the VP of Business Development at Unchained. And today I am joined by Tyler Campbell, our VP of Concierge and Technical Director, and Trey Sellers, our VP of Client Solutions. Today we have got a very important topic for you, operational security best practices for your Bitcoin private keys. So you've set up your Unchained Vault. You've made the big move to multisig, right? Because you're going to eliminate single points of failure. But now you have those keys to secure. Where are you securing those? What is the best way to do so? We believe that Bitcoin is a journey, and so is your security model. So what we're going to do today is walk you through every step of that to make it very easy for you to do and take that first step. But before we jump into that, we want to do a quick review over multisig and what it is. You know, how are you securing that Bitcoin currently? After we go through that, then we're going to go into 3 levels to securing your Bitcoin keys. First step, middle ground, and then that maximum security that we all want to strive for. And then we're actually going to cover additional security best practices that are a little bit more general. Then we're going to go into our live interactive Q&A to answer all those great questions that you guys have coming in. So to get started, I'm going to walk you through our quick multi-sig review. Now, so you're holding Bitcoin. Best asset that's ever existed, right? You're holding it in a 2 of 3 multi-sig in collaborative custody with Unchained Capital. What does that mean? Well, multi-sig essentially means you've created an address with multiple keys. In this situation, you created an address with 3 keys, and you need 2 to move that Bitcoin. You hold 2 keys, and Unchained Capital holds 1 key. In this, you are now representing your 2 keys in 4 pieces of information. What that looks like is 2 hardware devices, and then your backups or seed phrases for each of those devices, which is essentially a recovery for what is being held on that device specifically. But how do you then spend Bitcoin? What is needed to do a transaction in Bitcoin? Well, in the 2 of 3, again, you need to sign with 2 keys. What that looks like depends on you. You can then take your 2 keys and sign a transaction completely on your own and do a sovereign transaction within our Unchained interface or another interface, which we'll get into a little bit later. Or perhaps you are going to use one of your keys and ask Unchained Capital to use their key as the second signature. That's one of the beauties of collaborative custody is you do have, of course, a team of experts here, but also someone there to sign a transaction for you for convenience purposes, or perhaps because you've lost a piece of information. So next we're going to go into fault tolerance. How much information can you lose in your current setup before you run into an issue? All right. So remember, you're holding 4 pieces of information. And remember, that's the 2 hardware devices and the backups or seed phrases for each of those. And that's representing 4. You can lose 3 of the 4. You can lose, let's say, a hardware device and 2 seed phrases, or both hardware devices and 1 seed phrase. And Unchained Capital can still help you recover that Bitcoin by using our backup key. But this is vital. You have to have at least 1 key, whether that is in seed phrase form or hardware device, signing device. You have to have 1 because Unchained Capital only holds 1, and you need, remember, 2 to sign a transaction. We cannot help you recover if you have lost all access to all 4 pieces of information. That Bitcoin will then be inaccessible. And that's why it's absolutely vital to go through the next steps that we are going to touch on, which are going to be how to secure those Bitcoin keys. For that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tyler Campbell, who's going to walk you through those steps. Tyler?
Thank you, Justine. Absolutely. We're going to be diving into here the 3 levels to securing your Bitcoin keys. As Justine was highlighting a bit earlier, we're going to be working through the first step, that quick win that you can take, move on to the middle ground, where we can think about what you're optimizing for as it relates to your key security, and then again, maximum security to round it out. before we go into additional security best practices. So, before we really dive into these three levels, we do want to provide you with a little bit of a framework for how we're going to be following this discussion. And we thought a good way to represent this would be to actually represent that security journey. Bitcoin is a journey, and so is improving your security model, right? And so what we're going to be doing is working along this security mountain. So we're going to be starting with that first step. Then we'll move on to that middle ground, and then ultimately we'll reach the peak for maximum security. And we'll be referencing this graphic throughout just so we can kind of keep in line with where we're at as we move along our Bitcoin security journey. To start, we're really going to hone in on that first step. So that first step highlighted here on that graphic, it's what we want to be focusing on now. And this is the idea of separating one backup into a secondary location. Now, we've talked about the first step, and Justine was saying you built a vault. Now what, right? You have all the elements of your setup with you. Well, a very quick win is to separate an item into a secondary location. And before we show you kind of a good graphical representation of what that means, kind of want to take a pause and go over secondary location, right? We say that, but how can you start thinking about it? How can you build a mental model around a secondary location if one's not immediately popping into your mind? So some examples here of a secondary location include maybe a safety deposit box at a bank. Potentially could be a secure location at the residence of a trusted friend or family member. With this one, you do want to be mindful of whoever that trusted friend or family member might be, that they know the importance of what they're securing. You want to be thinking about them as that secondary location, still with security and privacy in mind. The option next in the bullet point here is a safe or a lockbox at a secondary property you own. If you do have a secondary residence or a secondary property, a safe or lockbox there would be a pretty good secondary location. And then rounding it out, we do have locked away at your office. If you have an office location and you have a safe or a secure mechanism at your office, that could also be treated as a secondary location. So throughout the rest of this discussion, when Trey and I are covering examples and we say, your primary location, be thinking your primary residence, right? Where you might be operating with your devices, or maybe it's where you did your concierge onboarding, or maybe it's where you initially built your vault. That's your primary location, often a primary residence. But when we say secondary location, start to think about these other items or these other elements and where you might be wanting to secure either your devices or your seed phrases. So that first step, right, that low-hanging fruit. I want to give you a visual representation of what we mean here when we say that first step of separating one seed phrase backup to your secondary location. So this is at a minimum, right after you've built your vault, or maybe you are in a position now even where you have all four of your elements sitting in one location with you at your primary residence. The four elements, again, being both of your hardware wallets and both of your sets of seed phrase backups. Now, if both of them, if all four of them are with you, easy, quick win. At a minimum, you separate one seed phrase backup from the other elements in your setup. So in this graphic here on the left-hand side, we have two hardware wallets and a seed phrase backup in the primary location. We have one seed phrase backup in the secondary location. And then, of course, that third key in our 2 of 3 shown on the right-hand side is held with Unchained. So the quick win here, what you do immediately is you eliminate a single point of failure at your primary residence. If there is something crazy that happens, right? Because life is crazy. If there is something like a natural disaster, maybe a fire or a flood hits, and your devices become water damaged or your seed phrase backup burns, well, you have one seed phrase backup that you have securely moved to a secondary location, and you would still be able to access your Bitcoin with the help of Unchained. So you would eliminate the single point of failure with all four elements just being in one location should something crazy occur. Now, Unchained can help recover if that primary location is compromised. You know that you have a seed phrase backup at the secondary location. You could use that seed phrase backup as one key, Unchained as the second key, and you could access your Bitcoin. So at a minimum, separating that one seed phrase backup is a fantastic place to start. Now, security is an evolution. Security is a journey. We want to be thinking about, okay, we've done that, but are there ways to improve that? How do I, what are the next steps I can take? So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Trey to talk us through some middle ground options based on what we're optimizing for. Trey, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Yeah, that first step really just gets you in a position where you eliminate that single point of failure. And there are obviously some trade-offs there that Tyler was talking about. The next step here, this middle ground that we're talking about, we think of this as, additional security above and beyond that first step that puts you in a better position relative to the trade-offs of just getting that one seed phrase into a secondary location. So we're actually going to take another step here to separate 2 items into that secondary location instead of just one. There's a little bit of nuance here that we have to consider when we are separating 2 items into a secondary location as opposed to just one, which is pretty straightforward. When we're storing 2 items at that secondary location, there are some optimizations that we have to consider. In option A, we're optimizing for sovereign recovery. And I'll go into exactly what that looks like, but keep that concept in mind. In option B, we're actually optimizing for protecting against any physical attack. This is often called a $5 wrench attack, and we'll dig into that a little bit further. So for option A, what we're referring to here is having your 2 devices in your primary location in your home and your 2 seed phrases in that secondary location. This is optimized for sovereign recovery. In the event that one of those 2 locations is compromised in some way such that those items are destroyed, you can still recover completely without the help of Unchained because you have access to key material for both keys. So you can take those 2 keys, you can log into Unchained, and you can move the funds, or you don't even have to log into Unchained. You can refer back to Caravan or to Sparrow Wallet or any of the other open source tools that are out there that allow you to recover your Bitcoin completely outside of our platform and be able to spend your Bitcoin. You are not dependent on Unchained to be able to get access to that Bitcoin. The trade-off here primarily is that you do have key material from both of those keys that are required to spend your Bitcoin co-located in each one of these locations. So this does leave you a little bit more vulnerable to a physical attack. If somebody comes to your home and they are determined to get your Bitcoin, they know you've got it there, you're in a position where you may be forced to spend it in their direction because both of those keys are in that same location. And then option B actually flips that trade-off there, where you're optimizing for protecting against that physical attack instead of, or prioritized above, the sovereign recovery option there. So let's look at that. So in option B, again, we're optimizing for protecting against physical attack, that $5 wrench attack that it's commonly referred to. And we're doing this by having the device and its corresponding seed phrase for each key in 2 separate locations. So you're keeping those 2 related items together and then separating them into 2 separate locations. And this does give you better protection against physical attack. If somebody comes to your home in that same scenario, they have to take you to a secondary location in order to have that Bitcoin spent in their direction. It can't just be done all in that same location because both of the keys are not there, right? And that makes it much more risky for them. It makes the time frame that they have to execute that longer, and that introduces more risk and just makes it more difficult to pull off, right? So you've got better protection against a physical attack in that scenario. However, in the scenario where one of those locations is compromised such that the key material that's stored there is destroyed, you are dependent on your custody partner, on Unchained, to help you recover that Bitcoin. So you would still be able to use your one key that you have available to you, and then cooperating with Unchained, we can help you to get into a completely uncompromised setup and be able to move the Bitcoin into that new uncompromised setup, so that you are fully recovered there. The one other trade-off here, when you're separating your keys into 2 different locations, is that spending from your vault sovereignly requires traveling to both locations. So in the previous option, in option A, you've got your hardware devices in the same location that is your primary residence, or wherever that primary location is. It's very accessible to be able to spend that Bitcoin because you've already got those devices there. You can very quickly and easily make signatures from each one of those keys to move Bitcoin. In option B, we've got a little more friction in that process, right? We have to sign a transaction from our primary location, and then we need to travel to that secondary location and sign a transaction if we want to move that Bitcoin sovereignly. But also, just to keep in mind, you do have the option of using Unchained, right? So as long as we're here, we plan on being here for a very long time, you can get in touch with us and ask us to provide that second signature on a transaction to help you move Bitcoin. So those are your two options. Those are the two trade-offs or set of trade-offs that you need to think about when you're separating two of these 4 items into a secondary location. But you are getting a lot more security just by taking that second step. And the last thing that I'll add before handing it back to Tyler is that if you're already taking the step of moving a seed phrase into that second location, it's pretty easy to just go ahead and move that device into that second location as well. When you're first getting set up with a vault and Unchained and you're a new client, you may want to test out the vault and play with the devices to move some Bitcoin out there just so that you get a feel for it, right? But eventually, it's much easier to get a better level of security if you do separate that second item into that secondary location. And since you already have picked out what that secondary location is, you should definitely take advantage of that. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Tyler to cover that highest level of security that you can get with these items.
Thank you, Trey. And yes, we hope to be around for a very long time. A lot of webinar content to cover. So, that's just when Trey said that, it stuck out in my mind. We have plenty more of these webinars coming your way. So we want to talk now about maximum security. And Trey really did a great job of covering that middle ground, right? Your 2 options based on what you're optimizing for and the trade-offs associated with them. Before we dive into the maximum security and the trade-offs associated there, do want to do just a recap here to kind of bring everyone to a good baseline before we head into the peak of the mountain, right? So what we covered was that first step, separating one backup into a secondary location. Secondary location, again, being a safety deposit box or a residence of a primary or a trusted friend or family member. It could be an office location, a safe at an office location. It could be a second residence if you have one. Taking one seed phrase backup and moving it to a secondary location is a solid first step. Now, that protects you against your primary location being a single point of failure should something crazy occur, like a natural disaster or burglary. However, the trade-off there, again, to reiterate, is you are more vulnerable to a physical attack because both of your keys are located in one spot. Now, moving up middle ground, what Trey just did an awesome job of going through was either keeping both of your hardware wallets in one location, your seed phrase backups in your secondary location, or one device and its corresponding seed phrase backup in your primary location, and the other device and its corresponding seed phrase backup in a secondary location. Trade-offs there, again, being either needing to protect yourself from a physical attack or relying on the collaborative custody member helping you recover your Bitcoin. So thinking about those things, thinking about the middle grounds, something you really want to do, as Trey mentioned, really low-hanging fruit. If you're already traveling to a secondary location with that seed phrase backup, after you're done testing out the elements of your setup, if you're a new client, bring the other device as well. It puts you in the middle ground quite easily. But now what I want to jump into is the maximum security at the very top. So we have securing your items in 4 different locations. So for your maximum security and kind of our framework for thinking here is we want maximum security for our vault Bitcoin, right? Each element of your setup, your hardware wallets and your seed phrase backups are placed at a geographically separate physical location. So in this scenario, right, 2 items can be compromised, any of these 2 items, and you can still recover without your custody partner. Now, let's say you have both of your locations where your device was located are compromised. If you still have your seed phrase backups, they might be at separate geographical locations, but if you are to travel to them, the beauty of these seed phrase backups, and when we talk about on concierge onboarding calls, is they are the ultimate backup to your key. You could load these 24 or 12-word seed phrase backups into a new device and still sovereignly recover your Bitcoin without even needing Unchained. Now, even up to 3 of these 4 different locations could be compromised. And as long as one is remaining, you could recover alongside Unchained, right? If you had at least one element of your setup, if you had a device or a seed phrase backup in your possession, Unchained is that second key in your 2 of 3 that could help you recover your funds. Now, the trade-off here, again, to note is that spending from your vault sovereignly would require you to travel to 2 locations where your 2 distinct and different keys are. So from an accessibility standpoint, do want to highlight that trade-off as well. Now, these 4 separate, geographically separate physical locations, want to stress the physical, right? We never want to be, again, storing seed phrase backups in digital form. You don't want to be taking a picture of them or keeping them in the Notes app on your phone. You do want them physically secured. And near the beginning of the presentation, I did cover off on secondary locations. Secondary locations, I know in this example, we have 4 locations to work with. So each client situation is different, right? But as you're thinking about secondary locations, you could make use of multiple, right? You could make use of a safety deposit box at a bank and a secure location at a trusted friend or family member and a safe at an office. You can start to mix and match those different options for secondary location as you start to think about each one of these geographically separate locations. So we're thinking about climbing that mountain, starting at the first step, going to the middle ground, reaching that peak for maximum security. But now, there's other items to think about when we're thinking about the operational security for our setup, for our multi-signature setup, right? There's account level stuff you might want to be thinking about. There's that wallet configuration file that was covered on in that beginning portion of the Bitcoin basics for this webinar. So to cover off on some additional components of operational security, I'm going to hand it back to Trey before we jump into the Q&A to cover off on what he might be wanting to give us in terms of additional security best practices. Again, as you have questions, we did that first step, middle ground, maximum security. If you have questions, that question box in the lower right-hand portion of the live storm is a great spot for those questions. I look forward to answering them in just a little bit.
Thanks, Tyler. So regardless of where you are on this security journey, there are some additional security best practices that we want to make sure that we either reiterate for the people who already have heard this or bring up to the surface for people who may not have, right? So the first thing Tyler mentioned just a couple minutes ago is in terms of those those seed phrases, you never ever want to create digital copies of those seed phrases. You never want to put them into digital form in any way, take a picture of them, put them into a Notes app, email them to yourself or to anybody else. These are strictly for you. They should be treated purely in the analog world and secured physically at all times. They really are backups to the devices that you're using, and so you shouldn't really need to access them. And if anybody ever asks you for your seed phrase, never ever give it to them. Never ever upload it on any website. Keep it completely offline at all times. All right, so just that quick reminder there. Secondarily, in terms of seed phrases, don't throw them away. This seems obvious when you are thinking about the seed phrases or keys that you're actively using, but there are times where you may need to do a key replacement on a vault, or you may build a secondary vault for whatever reason and move Bitcoin into that, finish using the primary vault and close it down. In the event that Bitcoin is accidentally sent to an address that is built from keys that are no longer in use, you want to make sure that those seed phrases are available to you so that you can recover that Bitcoin. So the best thing to do here, if you stop using keys and those seed phrases, is to label them as such, as inactive, and continue to store them in a location that you can access in case you need to. I've seen a lot of questions about key checks, and we'll cover some of those in the Q&A here. But these regular key checks that are built into the way that our platform works, they're enabled by default, and they're really important for not only making sure that the devices that you have that are securing those private keys in digital form are working properly and you can actually sign for a transaction when you need to, but it also reinforces the actual physical security of that key material. That also applies to those seed phrases. So, every 90 days or so, when you're doing those key checks, you also want to be making sure that that environment that you're storing them in looks the way that you expect it to, that it doesn't look like they've been tampered with in any way. If you've got a seed phrase at a trusted family member's house and you visit there on a semi-regular basis, make sure that that seed phrase is actually the way that you left it, that it doesn't look like it's been compromised, that it's still there, that it's still legible in terms of the ink that you've written that seed phrase on. All of these things are important, and it's really good to keep that top of mind when we're thinking about these key checks. So we'll get into some of the other questions and answers for the key check questions that I've seen as well. Another important one, when you are signing transactions, moving Bitcoin out of your vault, it is best practice to keep those keys in separate locations. If you have this maximum security, or even option B that we were talking about, that middle ground where you've got your devices in 2 separate locations, it is best to sign at your primary location, bring your computer with you to that secondary location and log in to the Unchained platform, and then sign with that secondary key. If you bring them together into a single location, you're recreating a single point of failure there. Even if it's for a limited amount of time, you want to avoid doing that if you can. If you can't avoid doing that, if you bring them together and you spend that Bitcoin, just make sure that you separate them again, as soon as possible, so that you get back into that better security posture. I won't spend too much time on the wallet configuration file because Tyler has covered it very well, but we just want to reiterate that you want to store this in encrypted format, and you want it to be accessible from multiple locations, because you don't want to have to rely on this file just stored on your computer, for example, which could be destroyed. And in the case that you need to access that file so that you can recover your Bitcoin completely outside of our platform, as we discussed previously, you want to make sure that you can access that from multiple locations. A really great way to do this is to store it in a password manager, which is encrypted by default. And I'll talk a little bit more about a password manager here in a second. When it comes to account security, we want to make sure that we have good account security on your Unchained account as well. That means using a strong password, again, something that can be derived from a password manager. Enabling 2-factor authentication. So your login process is a combination of something which is your password, and something you have physically. That prevents from any kind of remote type login that might be accessible to somebody who's trying to attack. And then that video verification, where you can set thresholds for when Unchained is asked to use our key, we'll go through that video verification process. All of those steps are really important to help make sure that you've got the best possible security on the account that you hold with Unchained as you're managing that Bitcoin. And the last thing that I want to make sure to highlight is a general best practice that goes beyond just Bitcoin, right? This is the concept of using a password manager and setting up 2-factor authentication on your email. Password managers are really important because you get much better security when you're using unique passwords across multiple accounts. The passwords that a password manager will generate are using really good randomness, and you don't have to remember them across all of the different accounts that you've got. And if you're forced to remember them, you tend to use the same password over and over again. What happens is, if those passwords are leaked because some third party had some kind of hack, your passwords are out there on the internet, and you've got the same password across multiple applications, you're at more risk for all of those other applications being hacked as well. And then secondarily, set up 2-factor authentication on your email. We use email for everything, including logins to our bank accounts, our Unchained account, and many other things. We have health records sent to our email account and other private information. Setting up 2-factor authentication on your email is going to put you in such a better place in terms of security for all of those accounts, not just with your Unchained account, and really get you to a better posture to defend against any of the attacks and hacking that happens on a pretty regular basis out there. So that's it for the additional security best practices. The one thing that I want to end with is that the Unchained team is here for our clients to make sure that if they have questions about any of this stuff that we've covered today, that you can get answers there. We're going to drop a link to a 15-minute time slot to be able to schedule some time with me to just talk about this on a more personalized basis. We can talk through your specific scenario and what you're trying to address in terms of your security posture. I'm happy to help with doing that. So feel free to take advantage of setting up some time with me there. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Tyler.
Perfect. I was about to schedule 15 minutes myself, so
Please do.
I was going to say that's like quite an offer. Anyone who's not taking advantage of that in the audience, I definitely suggest that it's a great way to ask more personal questions that maybe are not good to put in the chat here. I'll say.
Privacy is the name of the game.
There we go.
So we can now start our Q&A. As Trey was mentioning, saw a lot of awesome questions come into the question box. So I'm going to move over to the Unchained logo screen here, and we're going to actually bring forward all of us on the webinar. So for you live viewers, as we bring up questions, they're going to be shown to everybody viewing the live storm currently. But for playback later on YouTube, those questions don't appear. So you get to see our lovely faces instead of just looking at the Unchained Capital logo, although that is beautiful as well. I do want to mention with these questions, people ask similar questions often, right? And if somebody's thinking it, somebody else has actually typed it, you can go in and upvote questions. So it helps us get a good line of sight into what might want to be prioritized, what you really want us to answer. So definitely check out the questions that have been posted there as well and upvote them if you'd like. So as Trey was giving an overview of additional reminders for operational security, I was doing an initial scan and saw one that I really want to offer right off the bat. So let me go ahead and bring it up here. I'm going to start a live answer. And this is Joe asking, would it be smart to make separate vaults to fit different security levels, deep storage versus funds you might move more regularly? Joe, this is a great question. And I'm assuming you mean here also that with different or separate vaults, separate keys, because you have them, secured in different locations. And really that gets to the heart of those trade-offs that we were talking about as we move through those levels of security. There might be a situation where maybe you need to do payouts from your vault and you need to be conducting those transactions more frequently. Maybe you want to, just to make sure that you're all shored up, you want to deposit more collateral to a loan. To an Unchained loan. You're going to be needing to get signatures from your devices. In that situation, that maximum security, that 4 separate geographic locations might not be optimized for that particular use case for that particular vault. So I think this is a really good question to get everybody kind of thinking. You really want to be thinking about what you're optimizing for, right? The Bitcoin savings that you've been keeping in deep cold storage might be treated a little bit differently than a vault that you're using to secure maybe funds that are going to be kind of kept in your war chest to use for loan collateral. So great question. I think it would be smart to start thinking about that. Thank you for asking, Joe. And I do see it was getting some upvotes there as well. So appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I see another one that has come up a couple of times, so I'll bring up one of them. So this is about the 90-day key check that you actually find within your Unchained Capital interface. The key check is really designed just to help you ensure that your keys are where you think they are and in working order, right? So a lot of the questions are actually pertaining to the time frame that we actually recommend the key checks, and you'll get little alerts in your interface. And one thing that was really brought up that I thought was an interesting thought is if you are doing secondary locations that are hard to get to, this 90-day key check can become a little bit inconvenient. Now, you do actually have the option within your interface to turn that off. If you go in, it will give you a little option. There's a little drop-down menu, and you can do that. What I would recommend is if you do this, you need to set up your own notification. If it's an alert on your phone, set yourself a calendar reminder. At least, in my opinion, every 6 months, you should be confirming that these keys, whether that's a hardware device, signing device that's in working order, or the actual seed phrases are where you think they are and that you still have access to them. The reason that you want to do this is the last thing you want to come to find is 5 years down the road, you have no access to any of these keys, right? So it's just a health check. You do, as an individual, have the ability to turn that off within your interface though, but I do recommend doing a personal reminder if you do that.
And I would just add one more thing to that, Justine, is that, if you were to have one of those keys compromised and you didn't know about it because you hadn't been doing those key checks, if it is actually lost and you don't have the ability to get a hold of it in the future, you might keep sending Bitcoin to a vault that is effectively a 2 of 2 multisig instead of 2 of 3. And if it's 2 of 2 and something happens to that other key that you're controlling, or Unchained is offline for whatever reason, now all of a sudden you cannot access your Bitcoin. So it's really good idea to just make sure that you do have access to that, that it looks like the way that you left it, and that those devices are in working order. And by the way, one other quick benefit there is that you just keep yourself familiar with how the device works as well, right? It's always good to just have that reminder, have that muscle memory built whenever you're playing around with those keys.
That's perfect. It's a great reminder, and it's also, yes, important to note that the Unchained interface is one interface to interact with your Bitcoin address that lives on the Bitcoin network, right? So that key check is specific to the Unchained interface itself. Awesome. Do you gentlemen see any other questions that you wanted to jump in and get answered? There's so many good ones. You guys are on it today.
I know there are fantastic ones.
Yeah, I see one here. I'm gonna just address this. You know,
Perfect.
4 locations can be maybe a little daunting for some people, right? That does sound like a lot. 3 locations is perfectly acceptable as well, right? You're better than 2, maybe a little less than 4. But the way that I would approach this is keeping your a device and its corresponding seed phrase together in your primary location, and then separating the device and the seed phrase from key B into those other 2 locations there. That way you have access to that one key. It's very convenient. And then you've eliminated any single point of failure on the other key into those 2 different locations. So that's how I would approach it. You're definitely in a better scenario than if you just have those keys in 2 different locations, because you're really addressing the issue of Unchained being a dependency on you recovering Bitcoin in some scenarios that we had covered earlier.
Awesome. There is a follow-up question on the key check, so I just want to touch base on that before we answer the other one. There's a few questions about what happens if I don't do that key check. Do I need to contact Unchained Capital? So just wanted to kind of clarify on that. If you don't do a key check, the interface is going to remind you that you have a key check due, and it will see that key as inactive. Now, remember, a key check is also anytime you plug that device in and are verifying a address to send to, you're doing a transaction. So you don't even actually have to go through the process of doing the specific key check. It's using that signing device is considered a key check. Now, if you don't do it, it will sit there until you use the device. The problem is that if you are trying to then ask Unchained Capital to sign with one key, we see it as there's this one key out there that hasn't been verified and we don't know the current status of it. So rather than just letting it sit there and not be addressed, I would recommend turning off the key check and doing it on your own. You don't need to contact Unchained Capital in this situation. You can make that change on the interface, and then the key check itself is just plugging that device in and doing anything on the interface with it. So just wanted to clarify that real quick.
I see one that kind of is tangentially related to key checks, because when you think about doing a key check, you also, you're not just checking the, is your key operational, your hardware device? Do you kind of know the whereabouts of your seed phrase? Oftentimes when you do a key check, you might be notified, depending on the device you're using, of firmware updates that might be available for your specific device. Or you might even see on Twitter, if you're paying attention to other media, maybe there's your hardware manufacturer has introduced a firmware update. So this awesome question comes through from Greg. What is your opinion about firmware updates to hardware devices? What's a good security practice regarding this? So it's actually something I was thinking about kind of deeply the other day, and in relation to my own devices. So I actually think for firmware updates, there is kind of like a Goldilocks zone. So if you're into astronomy, a Goldilocks zone is a place far enough from like the sun or a heat source where there's like Earth-like conditions, right? There's a safe zone where you're not too close to the sun that you're going to get burned, but you're not too far away that you're going to freeze or not have oxygen. So a Goldilocks zone for firmware updates, what I like to think about it as is, let's say your hardware device manufacturer releases an update this morning at 8 a.m. you don't need to be first in line for that firmware update. Quite often, the manufacturers of these devices release firmware updates, and maybe there is an additional patch or a bug or something that was found within the first, couple weeks or so of the firmware release being updated. That is quite common, and usually it's just in the name of security. So I would wait a little bit, maybe a month or two, before updating your device to the latest firmware. Now, the flip side of that, so great, you're not too close to the release that you're going to get burned, so not too close to the sun in that Goldilocks zone. But the flip side is you don't want to be plugging in your device or trying to sign a transaction, and you notice that your device is running on firmware that was released like a year ago or 2 years ago. You do want to make sure that you're relatively kept up to date with firmware for your device, because there are oftentimes feature improvements, bug fixes, security enhancements. So what I would say is about a trailing 1 or 2 months after a firmware update would be a perfect Goldilocks zone to make sure that you are, up to date with the latest release, but you're not going to be subject to any of those quick bugs or quick fixes. Justine or Trey, if you have anything to add to that, but I thought that was a great question because it does pop up as you go to do your key checks.
No, I thought that was great. I like the term as well. It's a perfect way to think about it. Is it's okay not to be the first one to try that firmware update, but don't be the last either,
And a thing to note with firmware updates, you always want to make sure you have your seed phrase physically secure before doing a firmware update, right? Devices aren't perfect. Something crazy could happen as you plug it in, and you want to know that you have the ultimate backup to your key.
And I see a good one that's kind of a great segue from that from Kenneth. I think this is a great question. Kenneth asked, can't I just destroy my devices and secure seed phrases and just recreate it in 20 years? I love this question because it actually highlights the beauty of Bitcoin, right? Like, yes, those seed phrases are your key. That device is just a signing device. Now, it is storing your keys as well, right? It's like a secondary way to store it. But at the end of the day, your seed phrase is your key. And yes, technically, you could have those physical seed phrases secured somewhere with your configuration file, right? Because you need that treasure map, and never touch it and come back 20 years. The problem is, in 20 years, are you going to know where those seed phrases are? Are you going to be able to read that writing? Are you going to be able to ensure that you remember where they are? So on a technical level, yes, you can absolutely do that. But is that the absolute best way in a security best practices? No. Health checks are important. We all forget things, and hey, things happen. I've had seed phrases where I can't read the writing anymore. It's rubbed off, like these are things that happen. So it's really good to implement health checks and a good security practices that works for you. Maybe 90 days doesn't work for you. That's totally understandable. Find something that does work for you. But I think it is great to kind of highlight that, at the end of the day, you need those seed phrases and a configuration file, or have access to your Unchained Capital account, because we store that for you. So I thought that was a great question from Kenneth.
All right, I see one that kind of hits close to home for me. It's not directly related to key security, but it is related to verifying. In Bitcoin, we like to say, don't trust, verify. Can you use your own node when you're spending from an Unchained multisig vault? Tyler did a great video lesson on how to use a few different tools to load your configuration file into some of these other software that he was showing in the Bitcoin basics, and actually showing in video format, how would you spend from these? How do you check that the balances that you're receiving are in fact fully verified in a sovereign manner using your own node? And so I run Sparrow at home. I run my own node. I run an Umbrella node as well. And so I really loved being able to load my Unchained vault into Sparrow. And whenever I'm receiving Bitcoin into that, pulling it off the exchange or whatever, I can see and verify for myself, not trusting Unchained's node, that I am in fact receiving real Bitcoin, and that it's available for me to spend in that regard, right? And so the short answer is yes, absolutely. The more nuanced answer is that we are continually working to make sure that this functionality between our vaults and our platform and some of these other open source tools that are out there that allow you to manage your vault completely outside of our platform, to make sure that they talk well to one another. And so there are going to be more and more improvements in that regard in very short order over the next few months. We're working very hard to make sure that you basically could set up a vault on the Unchained platform, load it into Sparrow, and never go back to the Unchained platform again, fully verifying, sending, doing all of that completely outside of the platform, all in a self-sovereign Bitcoin native way.
Yeah, I love that. We say it to clients a lot. The more we allow our clients to trust us less, right, in turn, that builds more trust, and that's always what we're striving for. I do see like another question really kind of closely related to what Justine was mentioning, what Trey was just mentioning. And this question comes in and says, what other wallets are compatible with that external spend document? So that wallet configuration file. Now that wallet configuration file, it can be loaded up into Bitcoin multi-signature wallet software. And as Trey was mentioning, like these open source softwares are continuously being built out, and the goal is interoperability across all these softwares. So this answer is not static, right? The answer to this is an evolution. Right now, Caravan is an open source tool that is, hosted out on GitHub, but you can fork it and run it locally if you want. That's more tech speak, but Caravan, really easy to load up in your browser. Caravanmultisig.com runs right in your browser, and you could feed it that configuration file. Outside of Caravan, there is Sparrow Wallet, which Trey was mentioning, does a really nice job of importing that wallet configuration file. And then for the little bit more technical folks out there, Electrum Wallet has been around for quite some time, and you can use Electrum as well. Now, as time goes on, these wallet softwares improve, maybe new ones even get introduced. That's the goal, is to have that wallet configuration file be able to be loaded up into a slew of options for you. So you don't have to rely on that Unchained interface. You don't even have to rely on Caravan or Sparrow. Maybe you go somewhere else with it. But right now, kind of the big three, we'll say, are Caravan, Sparrow, and Electrum.
I can't get over how great the questions are, and we're actually over on time, but I think we should go another few minutes to get some of these additional questions answered. One that I just wanted to touch on, Bradley had a few good ones. I'll touch on one of them. The first one was about deposit addresses, and the other one was about DCAing. So I'll touch base on the deposit address first. Bradley is one of our I feel like he wins an award for attending the most webinars. I'm not sure if that's factual. I could just be making this up, but Bradley's always here with great questions, and we really appreciate it. So with this one, what happens if you deposit to an old address in your Unchained vault? Well, I am very happy to report that this is no longer something you have to worry about. Bradley, you will see that deposit come in just like it should. And you may have a little note on the side that you can see as far as your address history, but there will the things have been fixed, I'll say. I know in the past there has been a little bit of a lack of communication between some aspects if you're depositing to an old address, but that has been fixed, and you can see that in your vault. The other one that I did want to just touch on, and maybe I don't need to bring it up on the screen, is about a plan as far as DCAing into your Unchained vault. Is there consideration to add that? So something to keep in mind for people who don't know what DCA is, that's dollar cost averaging. It's generally when people set up a reoccurring payment to purchase Bitcoin in small amounts. Maybe that's $1 a day, maybe that's $5 a day, maybe it's weekly. You can really set this up. Swan has a great option for this. I know actually River just implemented this with no fees. And multisig's a little bit different. I'll say that one thing to consider with multisig is doing small little deposits into your multisig vault all the time is not necessarily the best way to do it. Think of every transaction that comes through is a certain amount of data, and that data builds up over time, right? And in multisig, you have so much other data involved there that it starts to become a little bit bulky. So the gentleman here may have another recommendation, but for me personally, I believe the best thing to do is if you're using DCA, find a great Bitcoin only exchange that does it, set that up, and then set yourself up a time that you're depositing into your multisig vault when it hits a threshold that you no longer feel comfortable holding in a place you don't hold the keys to, right? So I think that's a perfectly fair way to DCA. As of right now, we don't have a DCA option with Unchained, but you can set that up with your exchange and then automatically deposit it into your multisig vault with Unchained.
on that point, Justine, I'm going to share in the chat for folks just on that point. Our technical director, Tom Hanzik, has been on fire with some awesome content related to this very same topic. It's referred to as, UTXO consolidation, forming a solid UTXO strategy. And UTXO, if that term right off the bat, maybe you've heard it, but you want a good deep dive, I'm going to link into our chat here some fantastic resources that Tom has been putting together. This most recent one talks about the trade-offs associated with having a lot of those chunks of data sitting in your vault. It's more UTXOs, more problems, creatively titled. So check that out along with the other UTXO article that Tom has been pumping out there.
Wonderful. And Bradley put in one of the webinars we did, I think, last year that was about UTXO consolidation. So feel free to use those resources. We've got a couple. I was going to say, Trey.
Yeah, I want to jump on this one from Batsal.
Yeah, go for it.
I recently got a cold card. How simple, complicated is it to change a key on my vault? Is it worth it, or should I just create a new vault and transfer the assets? I think this is a really great question because it speaks to the nature of what you're actually protecting, which is those private keys that are in digital form on your device and an analog, human readable form in the form of your seed phrase. You don't need to necessarily create a new vault with new backups and all of that in order to move Bitcoin, your Bitcoin security from one device to another type of device. You can load that same seed phrase from a Trezor, let's say, into a cold card and be up and running and using that cold card. There's a restore function using some standards that have been developed in the industry that are supported across these different devices. And so you can just take that seed phrase, load it into your cold card, and continue using your vault exactly the same way as before, except when you go to sign a transaction, you'll choose the cold card method instead of with your Trezor or Ledger if you had been using a Ledger. And so it's really as simple as that. There's no reason to overcomplicate it by creating a new vault and dealing with new seed phrase and all of that. This interoperability, these standards that have been created around private key management is so great because it gives us that flexibility to not be reliant on a hardware wallet manufacturer to be around for the next 100 years when it comes time for you to actually spend your Bitcoin. If you've destroyed your devices and put them away for 20 years, like the previous question, you don't have to worry about whether or not that new device that you generated that seed phrase from is going to be around for you to be able to spend your Bitcoin. So anything to add to that, Tyler or Justine?
I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
Yeah,
we are at the hour. We're over the hour. Your guys' questions have been so great that, man, we could go on. So we would just want to thank you guys for joining this continuing education webinar. Again, we have them the first Friday of every month, and the goal of these is to cover a topic in a very deep dive situation or deep dive way that will help you grow in your Bitcoin knowledge. So any feedback, feel free to shoot it in the chat. Feel free to reach out on through email with any questions or to our customer service desk. The goal here is, again, to help you in your Bitcoin journey. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for being here. If you missed any portion of this webinar, feel free to stay right here. The replay will start in just a few minutes. And then you will see it show up on our YouTube channel early next week where you can share it with your family and friends. We'll see you guys next time.